Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz will join us shortly. Here's what we're looking at. How Chicagoans are dealing with day one of an excessive heat warning across the region. Did the prediction that Brandon Johnson's election would create an exodus of police officers ever materialize? And Johnson marks 100 days in office and movement in the Mapes trial. That and more from our Spotlight Politics team.
Why is it spelled D-A-W-G? It wasn't an ordinary D-O-G. It makes it special.
Plus, the Sausage King and Queen of Chicago celebrate 75 years of reigning over Milwaukee and Devon. It might look beautiful out there, but it is dangerous. Chicago officially set a new heat record for this date with a high of 98 degrees and heat indices soaring well into the hundreds. And we're in store for more tomorrow. How is the city beating the heat? Paris Schutz joins us live from Montrose Beach. Hey, Paris.
Hey, Brandis, this is the best place to be in the city right now on a day like this. And according to my phone, it's still 98 degrees right now as you see folks filling in the water. The heat index got as high as 115 earlier today at Midway. And as you mentioned, that sets an all-time record for heat on this very date. Now, this has caused CPS to reschedule some of their activities. Any practices for athletics have been moved indoors right now. Kids are in school with air conditioning, although we're told by a parent at this school, Norwood Park Elementary, that the AC wasn't really working very well. So you see windows open here. We didn't hear back from the CPS on this situation. And Cook County Health and Hospital System is starting to see some admissions to their ER due to the heat today, and they say to really watch out for the elderly residents of the city.
The one population that is at really high risk are our elderly patients. They have a lot of medical problems, on a lot of medications, and a lot of times the medicine they're on or their health problems will make it hard for their body to equilibrate or dissipate heat during these very high heat and humidities.
And the doctor says if you do have to be outside for work like we do today or for any other reason, be cautious and be aware of the signs of heat stroke.
Big things you look for, the first thing people will get are what is called heat exhaustion. They'll become dizzy, they'll be lightheaded, they have a bit of a headache. That's when you want to remove yourself from the climate, maybe put a cool washcloth over the nape of your neck, air conditioning, and start hydrating. The signs of heat stroke that are concerning are you become confused, maybe having difficulty walking. Get a very high temperature, you'll stop sweating. And really what's concerning about that is you might not recognize those symptoms of becoming confused. So it's good for people to know when they're out with friends and family, if they see those signs, you need to seek immediate medical care.
And also vulnerable, those that do not have homes or those who do not have air conditioning in their homes. The city has offered up 6 spots across the city for cooling centers, including here in Uptown, although they're open between 9 and 5 today and tomorrow. Department of Family and Support Service Commissioner Brandy Kanazi says her workers are being proactive and calling on vulnerable residents.
At DFSS, we are working with our nonprofit community partners and staff to make sure that we're getting out to individuals who are vulnerable, seniors, and families with small children. We've done robocalls to older adults, to over 30,000 seniors, making sure that they know about the excessive heat warning. We're getting out to our unsheltered residents, making sure that they know about it if they're not connected to the news, have water, and making sure that if they want to come inside to a cooling center or shelter, they can. And then lastly, we're working to make sure that we can do well-being checks for older adults and people who need them.
All right, how else can you beat the heat? Well, here is a delicious way. Why don't you head over to Mario's Italian Lemonade on Taylor Street, that iconic spot for some Italian ice. It was the place to be today, especially after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as students across the street at St. Ignatius got out and they lined up there. Workers saw a steady stream of satisfied customers all day. How good does Italian lemonade hit when it's this hot out?
Like 1,000% times better. Like, it's way better when it's hot out because you're just getting that sensation of like coolness into your body. So yeah, it hits way better.
I think doctor recommended. What's business been like today?
It's been pretty busy for the morning. Usually it gets busier at night, but it's been like a pretty constant like crowd coming in today.
And don't forget to check in on your four-legged friends. They don't really handle this heat very well. They don't really have a way to regulate it in their body. So frolicking around in Lake Michigan Michigan is a good activity for them to do, and we do get to do all this again tomorrow because this excessive heat warning is in place in Cook County until 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Brandis, back to you in that cool studio.
Paris, I hope you were able to get some Italian ice and that you find some air conditioning right now. Thank you.
You know I did.
And as we just heard from Paris, it's hot out there. To recap some information, multiple agencies across the city have opened cooling centers where folks can find relief. City of Chicago has opened 27 total centers across the city. It's expanding hours today and tomorrow to 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., as well as using the city's Park District field houses and public libraries to serve as cooling centers. Cook County says it's increasing its number of cooling centers in the suburbs to include courthouses across the county. They'll be open from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the Salvation Army says its community centers across Chicago will also provide relief today and tomorrow. The city's efforts to clean homeless encampments and help people experiencing homelessness is having success, according to a report from the Office of the Inspector General. The OIG reports that a program within the city's Department of Family and Support Services found housing for 94% of 238 residents living in an encampment between late November and spring 2022. And 83% were still housed by the fall that year. Of course, in 2022, DFSS partnered with Chicago's Continuum of Care to host those events where residents were able to complete all the steps needed to secure housing in one day. After 11 days of jury selection and then testimony, the federal case against Michael Madigan aide Tim Apes is now in the hands of a jury. Attorneys made their closing statements today in the case where Mapes is charged with lying to a grand jury and attempted obstruction of justice. Federal prosecutors argued Mapes could have been a star witness in an investigation into his former boss, longtime Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, and his longtime confidant Michael McLean, but instead lied about his knowledge of Madigan and McLean's actions to the grand jury. Mapes' defense attorneys presented their entire case in one day yesterday, arguing that Mapes wasn't lying, but actually had no knowledge of the alleged crimes the pair may have committed. Plastics pollution in the Great Lakes was the focus of Senator Dick Durbin's visit to the Museum of Science and Industry today.
The bottom line is we're just scratching the surface when it comes to the plastic that is being deposited in our waterways. Only 9% of the plastic produced that we use is actually recycled. The rest of it ends up in the waterways like Lake Michigan. 50% of the trash that's being dumped into Lake Michigan, for example, is plastics.
Durbin is touting a bill he introduced in the Senate last month, the Plastic Pellet-Free Waters Act. It would require the Environmental Protection Agency to prohibit discharging plastic pellets into waterways from facilities that make, use, package, or transport plastic pellets. Those pellets are used in the plastic making process, but they often make their way into waterways like the Great Lakes through spills, being washed down drains, and a number of other methods. Coming up in the program, recapping the first few days of the new school year. But first, did police staffing levels plummet as predicted under Mayor Johnson? That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Mayor Brandon Johnson marks his 100th day in office today, and there's no sign that his election triggered an exodus of officers, despite warnings from Chicago's largest police union president that it would. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with a look at the Chicago Police Department during Johnson's first months in office. Heather, thanks for joining us. So, Fraternal Order of Police President John Catanzaro told the New York Times on March 27th that if Johnson was elected, there would be, quote, blood in the streets. He predicted 800 to 1,000 officers would leave the force. Did that happen?
No, it did not. In May, CPD had 11,720 sworn officers on duty, and on August 1st, they had 2 more officers than that. No sign of an exodus. The overall size of the department, which also includes 641 non-sworn members, is also steady during Johnson's first 100 days in office.
And how has the size of the Chicago Police Department changed, though, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, in the past, past 4 years, the department has dropped in size by about 11% as part of a nationwide staffing crunch that has really made it difficult for law enforcement agencies across the country to keep veteran officers on the force and to hire new ones.
Mayor Brandon Johnson appointed Chief Larry Snelling in part to address concerns about officer morale, and the man is set to be, who is set to be the city's next top cop, is vowed to focus on officer wellness. How does he plan to do that?
Well, he's somebody who came up through the ranks as a Chicago Police Department patrol officer, so he knows what it's like to patrol a beat in Chicago. And he has said that he will do his best to reduce the number of mandatory overtime and canceled days off in order to help officers have a better work-life balance. He will face a lot of questions about those efforts as he is confirmed by the City Council.
I'm sure he will. Now, this leaves about 1,700 vacant positions, though, in the Chicago Police Department. What happens next?
Well, that is a really big question facing the mayor in his next 100 days. Next month, he will detail the city's projected budget deficit, and then in October, he'll unveil his spending plan for 2024. Whether he seeks to close those vacant positions and use that money for other initiatives is a crucial question. That money could help reopen the mental health clinics as he's promised, or expand a non-police response to people who call 911 while suffering a mental health crisis.
The treatment, not trauma initiative that we've heard a lot about. All right, Heather Sharon, we'll see you in a bit in Spotlight Politics.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It is all at WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night for our interview with Mayor Johnson on his first 100 days in City Hall. Our Spotlight Politics team weighs in on that and much more next. Stay with us. Mayor Brandon Johnson marks 100 days in City Hall. Jurors hear closing arguments in the perjury trial of ex-Madigan Chief of Staff Tim Mapes, and Chicago Public School students kick off the school year. Here with all that and more is our Spotlight Politics team, Heather Sharon, Matt Masterson, and special guest John Byrne of the Chicago Tribune. Thanks for joining us. So, Mayor Johnson's first 100 days, everybody. Heather, what type of leader has he shown himself to be so far?
Well, he promised to be collaborative, to bring everybody to the table before he makes a decision. And in some ways, he's done exactly that. Several times he has told us reporters that he is not a dictator, which is a stark difference from past mayors. Mayor Lori Lightfoot did not hesitate to sort of say her way or the highway. And of course, Rahm Emanuel learned from the best, the dailies.
So some of the more immediate issues since taking office, of course, the influx of migrants and public safety, which is going to be a big challenge for any mayor. John, how's he been handling these two issues?
Yeah, he's been trying his best to react to the migrant situation. He's opened a bunch of new shelters, but he got the city council to approve $51 million in spending to help deal with that. But he also, his Deputy Chief of Staff said the other day that they expect this to get much worse as Republican governors try to poke Chicago in the eye before the Democratic convention next year.
And that means they've got a year's worth of time to send more buses of people.
More buses. They expect them to ramp it up as we get closer.
And of course, there's the issue of public safety. I think we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Heather, there's also, speaking of the migrants, there's also been the issue this week of the city, the school district, reportedly turning away some of the migrant students as they report to a CPS school this week. What has the city school district said about that?
They say they're doing their best to accommodate literally hundreds of students, many of whom don't speak any English, who have been through significant trauma, getting them enrolled, getting them connected to services, but there have certainly been some hiccups, and to some extent that is to be expected. But let's not forget that this crisis began nearly a year ago, and the city has had a significant amount of time to sort of figure out what's happening as this sort of renewed surge began in April. even before Mayor Johnson took office.
And one of the things that the district has said is, of course, or the reports have said, a shortage of Spanish-speaking bilingual teachers, which we know is difficult to recruit. Heather, the mayor also has several important vacancies to fill in his cabinet. What are those positions and what's the status?
He needs a new health commissioner because he fired Allison Arwady not too long ago, and he also needs a housing commissioner and a planning commissioner. So really, he has not prioritized filling out those cabinet level positions, and I am sure when he comes on the show tomorrow, we will ask him about that, and he will, I expect, say some version of, we want to be deliberative. We want to make sure that everybody gets to sort of have their say about what this new cabinet should look like. The question is, are things left being undone while those deliberations go on?
And of course, we're counting on asking him that tomorrow when we get the chance to talk to him. John, has there been any movement on some of his major agenda items, like Bring Chicago Home or the Treatment Not Trauma item?
Yeah, and Bring Chicago Home, they just worked on approving some money for that. And on Treatment Not Trauma, they had a hearing, but that's as far as they got on that one. So we'll have to see on Treatment Not Trauma. Bring Chicago Home, he's moving ahead on that one a little more quickly.
And of course, quick refresher, remind us what Bring Chicago Home and Treatment Not Trauma are.
All right, Bring Chicago Home he's going to increase the real estate transfer tax and raise $100 million to help end homelessness in the city of Chicago. He just announced that he was going to not go ahead with his original plan and instead have a 3-tiered system where if your real estate transfer, you're selling your house, it's less than $1 million, your payment will actually go down. Between $1 million and 1.5, it goes up a little bit, and then above 1.5 million, it goes up quite a bit more. And so they hope to raise $100 million for that to help end homelessness, homeless services. Treatment Not Trauma is his pledge to reopen mental health clinics around the city and to have not have police respond to problems with mental health breaks when people call with mental health issues.
So Matt, closing arguments in the Mapes perjury trial today, we just mentioned it earlier. What did jurors hear in court?
So prosecutors were walking jurors today through the various differences between Tim Mapes' grand jury testimony in 2021 and what he said on the phone in recorded wiretapped conversations with Michael McLean, ex-Speaker Madigan's close confidant, over the course of several years. These tapes took up a lot of the trial. The grand jury that Mapes testified before was investigating McLean and Madigan in regards to the ComEd bribery scheme. Mapes, who was the Speaker's, of course, chief of staff for 25 years, prosecutors say he repeatedly lied to try to minimize that relationship and conceal specific assignments that Madigan had given to McLean between the years of 2017, 2018, and 2019. They say he was protecting his boss, he was staying in the foxhole with this tight-knit group. But anyway, McLean and Madigan were still indicted. They're, of course, facing a racketeering case next year. But Mapes' attorneys are saying he didn't lie. He simply misremembered things. These were conversations that had happened years before he testified before the grand jury, and they were about things that he said were somewhat irrelevant topics. They were sort of off-the-cuff conversations that they had about some of these things. Mapes had already resigned before a lot of these conversations took place. So he was saying that these were somewhat irrelevant topics in his head, and he simply didn't remember. And that's what prosecutors have to prove. Not only that he misspoke, but that he knowingly and willfully did so to the grand jury in 2021.
And Matt, what's next for this trial?
So closing statements wrapped up today. Deliberations started briefly. Those will resume tomorrow, and jurors will have as much time as they need to figure out if they want to convict or acquit on the charges of perjury and attempted obstruction of justice.
All right, all eyes on the federal court as that happens. So as we mentioned, Chicago Public Schools started this week. Next year, CPS is going to get an elected school board. Matt, what could this new era of leadership mean?
Yeah, it's really a sea change for education in Chicago. This is something that advocates had pushed for years, for decades even, and it's going to give parents and families and just the people of Chicago more of a voice in how CPS runs, things from vendor contracts and leadership roles to just how things go day to day inside schools. So for now, there's still an appointed board for the next year. Mayor Johnson made his appointments last month or earlier in his term. They have committed to sort of setting this transition up, making things move freely, going into the next 15, 16 months before this change actually takes place. But there's going to be a lot of work that has to get done before these elections take place next fall.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, obviously, how the new board works with the mayor, who, as we all know, has been a big supporter of it. Beginning of the school year without heat between the mayor's office, the Chicago Teachers Union, CPS, maybe a little bit, but not the kind that we're used to seeing. A couple months ago, CTU leadership called it a, quote, historic reset. We just heard from President Stacey Davis Gates here on the show last night saying that, they're actually involved with the administration for the first time. Heather, what does this optimistic tone mean for the school year and the CTU contract, which is up next summer?
Yeah, speaking of a sea change, this is really a sea change. To even see the head of CTU next to the mayor on the first day of school, everybody singing from the same hymnal, so to speak, is very, very different. The proof, however, will be in the pudding. Can Johnson and Davis negotiate a contract that is acceptable to the membership? And how much flexibility does Johnson have to sort of make good on what the CTU demanded from mayors Rahm Emanuel and Lori Lightfoot? They want not necessarily a raise or sort of better benefits, but they want services. They want wraparound services in schools and to mental health care, and they want change on affordable housing and those sort of things that help students get prepared to lead. Those are big asks, and those negotiations, even among friends, aren't going to be easy.
Okay, that is Spotlight. John Byrne, Matt Masterson, Heather Sharon. Thanks, everybody. And up next, hot dogs on a hot day. But first, a look at the weather. In 1948, the neighborhood around Milwaukee and Devon Avenues was mostly undeveloped prairie. But a pair of Northside newlyweds saw potential in that prairie as a place to hop off the streetcar or drive in for a bite. Chicago has changed a lot since 1948, but nearly nothing has changed at Superdog. And that's just how people like it. Superdog superfan Erica Gunderson has the story as the drive-in celebrated its 75th birthday earlier this summer.
Hiya, thanks for stopping. May I take your order, please?
Customers placing an order at Superdog DriveIn have received the same cheerful greeting since Maury and Florrie Berman opened it in 1948. 75 years later, the restaurant and its beefy rooftop mascots could frankly be called Chicago icons. But when it started, Superdog was just meant to be a summer business to help the couple pay for college.
Our parents were high school sweethearts, and neither of them had any restaurant background. To open a restaurant, a business together, they're married less than a year. The creativity, the forethought, the guts to do this. And it was successful.
And once the Bermans relished a taste of the hot dog life, there was no going back.
It was their passion. They liked it. They liked it not only as a business, but as a hobby. So even if they weren't working that day, which was almost never, because they were working a lot, they would stop in.
As the business grew, the Bermans developed innovative methods for speedier sausage slinging. They also raised 3 of their own little wieners at the restaurant.
I learned the ABCs and the numbers sitting at my mom's side, listening to her take orders at our switchboard.
Okay.
Over the years, Drucker's husband Don and the Berman grandkids have also joined the hot dog pack, along with many longtime employees.
I've been here for so long that it's just easy. You know, everybody is nice, it's a family, it's just like home.
My adult children grew up in the business. They both love Superdog and both work here at least a couple of shifts a week. Plus, my niece joined our business 13 years ago.
The family lost its original hot dog lovers, Maury and Florrie, in 2015 and 2018. But Superdog remains faithful to their vision.
Our menu is the same as it's been for 75 years. The way you talk to the switchboard, even the way we say, hiya, thanks for stopping. May I take your order, please? That's a phrase that my mother used in 48, 75 years ago, and it's a phrase that we still use today.
And personally, I think that's the best part.
For me, Superdog has always been a magical place. Growing up in Logan Square, we'd pile the family into the station wagon and make the long drive down Milwaukee Avenue until we'd see Maury and Florrie winking at us.
Clearly, I'm not alone.
My dad used to come here all the time, and he would take us here, and yeah, it was kind of like a night out.
It has the best hot The whole old school thing, you know, when they bring the food to your car, and it's just a nice experience.
To have a place like this last 75 years, I think that just shows you how good it is.
And that's why the family says they plan to keep Superdog just the way it is for many decades to come.
Being an iconic Chicago institution, we just grew up here. And as I like to say, we've been at the same corner of Milwaukee, Devon, and Nagel for 75 years, just doing the same thing every day.
From the bottom of my pure beef heart, this is Erica Gunderson.
She really does love Superdog. For all its retro charm, there is one very modern Superdog story. The Berman's granddaughter, Laura Eustick, who manages the Wheeling location, successfully campaigned to get an official hot dog emoji created in 2015. And no, there is no ketchup on the emoji. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Paris and I speak with Mayor Brandon Johnson about his first 100 days in office. Now for Paris Schutz and all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and cool out there. Have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.